So speaking about Mee Pok Man, maybe I just want to take a nostalgic trip back as well as a kind of a space check. I mean, Alan has talked a lot about the body, maybe, so I just talk about more of the spaces and places. So when I first saw Mee Pok Man in the film festival, I remember it was 1995 at the Jade Cinema a few blocks away, and actually that was mind blowing because for the first time in I think for many people in post-colonial Singapore, post 1965, this is where you see your neighborhood being screened in the full glory, the underbelly of society. I mean, this is considered quite inane in today's standards, but just think of 1995. That you see the kind of underbelly of society, you see places that would not be featured in the Singapore Tourism Board advertisement, not botanical gardens, but Geylang. You see profanities being sprouted out in an almost unrestrained way, almost unrestrained, unscripted. So that was what Mee Pok meant to me in 1995. And I've actually watched it X number of times because as part of screening to students in classes. So sometimes I can even memorize the script over there. But today I just want to show, like 20 years on, what has happened. I think for many of you who have watched the film, I mean, it seems like a foreign country in some ways. The past is a foreign country. What has been recorded and how has it changed 20 years later? So for the past few days, I actually did as much as an updated check on where these places, what happened to them, and how have they been used today or remembered today. Okay, bear in mind that for those who follow Singapore cinema for the past 10 years, there's a lot about nostalgia, old places, old romances, when you have seeped images and experiences of places, a lot, very meaningful narratives, old HDB flats like Queenstown, etc. But back in 1995, the spaces that were featured were not intentionally for heritage purposes, not for memories. They are places of excess, of neglect, very banal spaces, that of everyday life in this rather exploitative and cannibalistic society as imagined as by Eric Koo. So 20 years on, how do we look at it? 20 years is actually a long time in Singapore's modern history. It is 2/5 of post-colonial Singapore, independent Singapore since 1965. It's actually 1/10 of the founding of modern Singapore from 1819. So 20 years, especially for those who are living in Singapore, you know that this landscape changes so rapidly, like a building appearing from nowhere one day and it disappears the next day. Something as big as the National Stadium in the past can be completely demolished and the sports hub comes out from nowhere. So in this rapidly changing landscape, what can we make sense of Mee Pok Man? So I'm really glad that you have watched the film before the screening before this talk, so I can actually help you to do some location shots. So very quickly, this was just close to my neighborhood. I wonder where was it. So you remember the point when Joe Ng was walking through these HDB flats or public housing flats that have yet to be built. It's actually in Boonton Estate near Boonton MRT station. The overhead bridge is still here. Interestingly, the grills have not been changed yet. Miraculously, the field in front is still empty. And that, how do I go on? So without trying to get the convenient way of asking the film makers or the team like where the location shots were, I actually did a bit of like consultation with my friends that are architects and photographers, and immediately they gave me this Google image, street view of Boon King, of the bridge that actually faces the unfinished buildings in 1994 that Joe Ng was walking through. So this block of flats actually faces the Kong Wai Siu Hospital. So for those wanting to do an immediate pilgrimage after that, some of the convenient examples I can provide. So maybe you can go to the next slide. Okay, this is not an advertisement. The location where the Mee Pok Man was shot, the coffee shop itself, it is a real coffee shop, it's not a studio. It is in Tiong Bahru at Moh Guan Terrace. They proudly display the postal over there. the Mee Pok is actually not bad. Yeah, but it's actually quite a place to try. But it is still largely intact. Surprisingly, some of the chairs have changed. Of course, if you go there in the afternoon, which I just did on Friday, you didn't get Bunny or the other prostitutes and pimps there. What I got was office ladies just having their lunch and going away after that from the neighboring offices. So they actually capitalize on this. It's good that they mentioned the clip itself had included the Huabi restaurant. So it's still largely intact, largely serving its purpose here. Maybe you can go to the next spot. Okay. This is really indeterminate spaces. They went around. I suspect the Shell station could be in Ultram itself. You can see that it has the facade has changed. All these bars around, some of them are still, this is in Serangoon Road if I'm not wrong. The two hearts are still there, but they have changed the title. I think the new management have taken over these places. So when you talk about heritage, interestingly, some of these girly bars do exist for decades, unsurprisingly, in areas like Geylang itself. So maybe Karen can go to the next one. Eric Koo did also feature, the kind of eating in the introduction of the film. Thankfully, we got a shot of Newton Grilled Seafood, Newton Hawker Center, which in the 90s was already quite a place to be in, one of the main hawker centers. It is under renovation recently, so I didn't have access to show you the updated picture. Okay, Karen, maybe we can go to the next one. So this was my most interesting find. I asked several people where this place was. Bear in mind that I don't think the director, they consciously wanted to locate and spell out where the location of the site was. So through Google Satellite, an architect like Khiun, thanks to Khiun, he gave me this image that perhaps this was the Spooner Road Estate. Do you guys know where it is? It's at Kampong Baru near the Keppel area, the Malayan railway lines. It was actually built in 1952 by it was called the Malayan Railway Apartment, actually. So this was the satellite image that was given. Another of my friend, Darren, said that it could be perhaps in Cassia Road near Geylang, because they had a similar elongated, trapezium-shaped flats. But finally, it was confirmed that by Joe Ng himself, through another friend, that it was in Spooner Road. This is an interesting estate. 1952 was built, but it still exists today. If you see in the Mee Pok Man, okay, bear in mind that the apartment was not just shot in one place. It was shot in several places, which I will go through as part of Housing Board Public Housing Living. So this was Spooner Road. Today, it is still a very poor rented apartment estate. If you walk through it, you see in the lifts today, they have all sorts of public advice against borrowing from loan sharks, etc. It's quite chill out, but it's not the most wealthiest place, but very largely relevant to the kind of underbelly that you see, except that it's painted yellow today. So you get rid of poverty by painting yellow, to make the place look better. Okay, so we can go to the next slide. Boonton Street. It was wonderful that the barber was featured, the street name was featured, but if you go to Boonton Street today, you get refurbished shop houses, very expensive place. I was told by the architect historian Khiun that the original site here has already been demolished. Parts of the rows of flats, shop houses have already been demolished. And this sighting of the street sign may perhaps been different from where it was originally located. But if you can see in Boonton Street in 1995, do you guys know where Boonton Street is? It's actually in Shenton Way, the heart of the financial center itself. Nearest MRT station would be Telok Ayer Station. So it's a very glamorous place, very expensive. It's near Amoy Street. You have some heritage markers here, but definitely not on Mee Pok Man. You have the heritage markers detailing the lives of the early immigrants. And you can see the changes now. In the past, it was really a neighborhood. You have like a tire battery store here, which is unthinkable today with the rentals of like $30,000 per month, perhaps. Okay, so we can go to the next slide. This is a bit of a walk. So you remember in one of the scenes in which Mee Pok Man, he just wanders aimlessly around these derelict, forgotten spaces. This is on Wilkie Road near Mount Sophia, up the hill itself. And today, I mean, several places, arts groups have been here, like NAFA before. It was supposedly built in 1935, but now it's actually quite a comfortable cafe, and if you want to organize a wedding there, you know, that could be a place too. But back then in 1995, this was completely abandoned, and I don't think they need any permissions to get filming done over here. So maybe we can go to the next slide. You remember the scene when the client takes Bunny to the hotel room for sex? This was the 7-story hotel, demolished in 2008, but built in 1953, even before the land there was being reclaimed. So you can see that the big skyscrapers there, United Square, and that IMP building, what is this called? It's the Gateway. So it was the seafront in the 1950s. I mean, you kind of, it's kind of unimaginable today, right? So it had a good view of the open sea, and it was a posh 5-star hotel, but gradually over time it fell into kind of neglect, became a backpackers inn, but demolished in 2008 for the downtown line. So what you have today is Bugis MRT station DTL. But it had better days, in fact. In fact, this was one of the more interesting places where older people would remember that they have very good chicken rice, if I'm not wrong. So maybe we can move to the next one. But what I found actually very interesting is the Ultram Estate. Do you remember that there was actually an estate called the Ultram Estate? If you go to Ultram today, Ultram MRT station, there's a piece of empty land over there. It has a very interesting history. So I call it demolish and demolish again. In 1847, it was the Ultram prison that was built by the British colonial authorities. For those who study Singapore history, the famous Indian mutiny in 1915, you know, so it was like 100 years last year. In which the Indian troops actually, you know, instigated by German prisoners, rebelled against the British authorities. They was being suppressed by a multinational force, and the mutineers were shot, executed in the grounds itself. So there was in 1950, there was another film that actually captured parts of the Ultram prison. You can't imagine in today's terms, you know, there was actually a prison in Ultram itself. Koban Fitna, victim of slander, I think it was 1955, if I'm not wrong, I think I got it wrong here, in which parts of it was filmed in Ultram prison, of the protagonist being wrongfully imprisoned. And by 1963, the new PAP administration under Lee Kuan Yew demolished the prison and built a new housing estate called the Ultram Park Shopping Complex. They had very grand ideas back then about what this complex, it has about 500 shops, if I'm not wrong, including quite a famous Dragon City restaurant over there. I think we remember our heritage through food most of the time. So this was the early picture. Someone wrote a good blog about it, but I did a bit of search. It actually was ready by 1969. 1971, it was the showcase for the Commonwealth meeting in Singapore. But as early as 1973, people were complaining about the lack of business, the competition from other places, but it did house many residents there. By 1994, when Mee Pok Man was being screened, so this Ultram became the scene where the Mee Pok Man returns home from work, right, at night. So this was the night scene here. Really grim, just, you know, the building lit up by this, the pre-LED fluorescent lights that were not the most exciting ones, you know. And you can see shops that were being closed, very quiet, very desolate. And I went to the URA, Urban Redevelopment Authority, City Gallery. So for those who are not familiar in Singapore, if you want to have a sense of what is going to happen to the place, you can just visit the URA Gallery. They have everything there. They have the whole streetscapes laid out for it. And what I see here in Ultram, blank. Future residential site. So we're not sure what it is going to be, but I don't think it is going to be for public housing again. So maybe, Karen, if you go on to the next one. Okay, so this was the dreams, the plans for Ultram in 1970s, the arcade in the air. You know, it's like, you know, the kind of intelligent city rhetoric that you see today. And by Mee Pok Man in 1994, this is the kind of neglected, desolate spaces in Singapore. So this is how, I think effectively, I mean, I just give you a few examples of spaces that how film can actually help to anchor history. Film can be part of a historical archives in this respect. So maybe I just end up here and I will leave the floor next to Martyn, who has been really involved in Mee Pok Man back then. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, KK. It's really interesting. I think, well, I'm sure people would have questions. So I think why don't we go to Martyn? Yeah. Okay, I think...
I don't mind taking questions now.
Yeah.